Greetings, folks. So I'm going to be answering some questions about Model V from Byzantium Crusader, and he or she may not have seen. So if you go to the home page, well, if I go there, it will play the auto videos. If you go to playlists, VIT, and then here, Post-Socionics, click on there, and you'll get it. Now I'm going to change the screen to the questions. Stop screen, share. There. Here we go. I narrowed it to make it easier to read. These are going to be questions about this and this. So, I don't know if this person has seen the video or the full explanation. Okay, here we go. How the contrarian function my criticism towards this model is it lacks details. The NiTx, for example, doesn't have any specifications on the following. Well, I will write it out. For the contrarian position, how the contrarian function manifests or what it does so that it can be categorized as such. Okay, well, let's have a look at the contrarian position. And then we can sort of intersect some things. And then we can sort of think deductively, and then we can sort of go from some things which are not deduction. So, slot 7, contrarian alternative. So, about the slot. Least valued, on average. Well, in my case, Fi is valued to a certain extent. I'll go through that. Okay. The function in slot 7 is usually recognized by the type as a weakness that can be worked on, albeit reluctantly. The degree of reluctance varies by type, e.g. Fe DOMs keener to work on Te than Se DOMs to work on Ne. For certain narrow uses, the merits of this function can be seen by the type, even though it runs counter to the dominant function. But that counter can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. It represents the other side of the mindset of the type, e.g. the mindset of Ti and X is called balanced stable in SHS. It is introverted and rational. Ti and Fi are both introverted rational functions, so by definition, only Ti and Fi DOMs can have the BS mindset. Although some people could say ENTPs have that, but a different kind of BS. In my humble opinion, a type prefers to stay in its mindset and so switches to and fro between its valued and unvalued mindset functions, or mindset function. Enneagram 6, me, resemble that, can it? Will switch between Ti and Fi more than that. That's just an opinion. The author of this model Vaserlan resembles that. To me, Fi is more important than Fe, but I enjoy being an Fe state more than being an Fi state. Okay, so what I was thinking now as I was reading that was I will put up my subfunctions of Si, then I can talk about, that will help me in talking about Si usage in NIT. So this came up a little bit with Haley yesterday, where that subfunction of Si, which is about, let me get the Si subfunctions up. Right, model Vaserlan, functions, single functions. Am I going to copy them all across? I might copy these all across because this is just the event folder. Copy, not move. Copy. Right then. So those have been copied across, as you can see. So let's go back to the question, because the question is going to be about, and it is in the counter club. Now, another idea about that is it's the counter club, but it is part of the default. I was going to say default field of consciousness, default mode of operation. So there's something here. An extreme introvert is likely to show better use of counter club default functions, slots 5 and 7, than a moderate introvert. Conversely, a moderate introvert is likely to show better use of club situational functions, which for the introvert are extroverted than the extreme introvert. So, a more reserved, a more introverting NIT resembler is more likely to show better FI and SI, or markedly to at least spend more time in that state than, say, a more extroverted NIT. The kind of people that get mistyped as the INTJs. So they might have much stronger T in any, because they're in that state more often, where they're extroverting their thinking and they're intuiting. So now I'm going to get back to the question, if I can find it. And then I'm going to go through how the contrarian function manifests, because I'm assuming this person resembles NIT. How the contrarian function manifests, or what it does so that it can be categorized as such. Okay, so we know about the position, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to intersect the position with how I've defined the function. So, and then we can sort of go through this and see what we get. So, instinct to habit, routine, and orthodoxy. Right, okay. So, orthodoxy in NiTx. Well, they're not really orthodox, but with that strong TE, it's like, well, if it works, I don't care if everybody, it's like they don't even care enough to sort of, maybe that's one way how the FE Achilles heel, FE averse manifests, is that an NTP, they might be like, oh, that's how you should be doing it, but I want to do it my way. Whereas NiTx just won't care. Like, if it works, if it's the conventional way of doing it and it works in their opinion, they'll do it that way. They're not going to try and reinvent the wheel. So I can sort of see they've got a pragmatic viewpoint on orthodoxy. If the orthodox method works, they'll use it. Whereas NTP will just want to change it up, just to sort of show that creativity, just out of sort of the arrogance of the in the NTP and wanting to think differently. But again, valued TE over TI. Right. So we're looking at contrarian alternative SI subfunctions. Now, maybe I get a schedule. I can imagine an INTJ would use that on others, because as Kersey wrote, the NTJs, they just see themselves as a hell of a lot more competent than anybody else. And so I can imagine them doing that to others, asserting that on others, but they wouldn't like anyone doing that to them. Probably because they think that they know better than, because well, mostly they do. If someone's asserting procedures onto them, right. And also because this is why it's a contrarian alternative. Right. Getting into the nub of the matter is because there is a little bit of a TI thing. Well, not a TI thing, but there is a way. There is a symmetry in the models where we try to get the functions to be opposite of each other. So, for example, this especially works with the irrational functions. So, there's a part of SE, extroverting instincting, sorry, that is about immersing in the present context, situational awareness, this particular situation, and that is opposite from any transcontextual thinker. Okay, so you think, oh, that's nice. They're nicely opposite from each other. They are each other's contrarian alternative. They are mutually exclusive. So, if we look at NI, if we want to reduce NI to one thing, we say intuition of development. So in NFJs, how people develop and how it itself develops. So personal development. Or with NTJs, you've got it with TE, so it's like development of objects and projects. So there, development. But what is the instinct of SI? Oh yes, I'll just say, going through the temperaments, there's an artisan instinct, there is a guardian instinct, there is an idealist intuition and a rational intuition, right? But the instinct of the guardian is to conserve, is to protect, is to cautiously protect. That's Dario's got that in Magic Diamond. So it's like the instinct is there. And so that is to stabilize the situation. So NI, the NJs are looking to develop the situation, the project or the person. So NI is about development, SI is about stabilizing. So those two things are at odds. Those are mutually exclusive. Development and stabilization are mutually exclusive. But there's going to be sometimes when the INTJ resembler is going to be like, oh, we just need to stabilize this situation. So it's like they'll switch. So again, it's the contrarian alternative. So I came up with this term, contrarian alternative. And then with all these terms I came up with, I was looking for, somebody else come up with it. Because again, NTP stuff, they want to be original. And then I saw actually it's used in finance. I thought, actually, that's quite good because it also works metaphorically in that sort of this idea of you hedge your bets. So it's like the contrarian alternative position. So you might buy one stock and think, well, if these certain things happen and that stock goes down, then this one might go up because it's like because I think that they're non-correlated. So contrarian alternative. So that's an example there of that's where to develop a situation and stabilize a situation, they are each other's contrarian alternative. Imaginative. Now, I went over this with Haley. She was saying that she used to think mainly without words and only recently has developed a commentary as she thinks. They did this video on her channel, which literally has 100 times more subscribers. And basically, if you take my number of subscribers, 1.64, and move the decimal point 2 places to the right, you get hers. Right. So what's the question? The question was, how does it use? I'm answering this question. How the contrarian function manifests or what it does so that it can be categorized as such. Well, it sort of manifests as somebody sort of switching to it as the need arises. This is like going to be the same as the role function in Model G. And I used to bang on about the role function a lot because someone's got a certain mindset and they are going to switch to it. But imaginative, again, that's hard because it's an imaginative subfunction. Like you really gotta have like a close conversation with somebody to get an idea with this one, especially. That was something new that Haley told me. Right, imaginative SI. Situational. Yeah, that's tricky, that one, because you'd have to go sort of like between images and symbols, and then what lies behind the symbol, and does that contradict it? That's like highly speculative. Maybe the harmonizing. Okay, so we can sort of say this with the comfort sense, and this is something that we can see. I would say that the relation of INTJ to comfort. Okay, so a lot of times if they are doing their NIing and when they're in that state and they're not aware, this is something Haley mentioned where she's not aware of her body. If you really are in what NLP would call downtime, where you really got that inner focus, almost an out of body experience, if it's really NIing. So there's that downtime aspect of NI, and then there's also the aspect of NI And there's a contrast between uptime, where your attention is directed completely outwards. So there you can see the opposite between SE and NI. And there's also another dichotomy that from NLP that's useful: through time versus in time. So SE would be in time, in this specific moment, and NI is through time. And so the idea being that if you are through time, you've not got as much attention on the here and now. So those two functions can be categorized differently as like S in NI, where SE is uptime and in time, and NI is downtime and through time. But as relates to this, why did I bring that up? Why did I bring up that aspect of it? Right, yes, because there's a little tension there with SI. So in an NI state, you can be out of touch with your body. Some hypnotic states are related to NI, I think, but then there's also a sort of an SI kind of model of hypnosis, and I can prove that. I have a book recommendation for you, you INTJs, because you INTJs are nearly always interested in hypnosis. Nice picture on the front as well. The Science of Self-Hypnosis, but this method is very SI. Adam Eason appears to be an initiator guardian. ESTJ preferences. So that's a very like SI method of getting into a self-hypnotic state. So again, I got a practical example for you. So there's methods in here to reduce pain. So you could argue that, okay, you're going into a sort of a state that we tag as NI in order to suppress an SI thing, internal harmony. So if I was writing the boxes for SI, for INTJ, off the top of my head, I would say, yeah, they can get very procedural. They can sort of follow their own procedure. But a lot of times, something that Kersey noted, and again, where it's a contrarian alternative, Kersey noted that the INTJ can change the plan quite well on the fly because it's got the goal in mind and can adapt the processes to get to the goal because it's got that fluid intuition of development, whereas STJs can get lost when the plan goes awry because they don't know how to adjust the plan unless they've got a lot of experience and it's like, oh, this is what we do in this situation. When it goes wrong like this, we do that, because I've got all of these experience and the read up on what to do in certain situations when certain things in a process go wrong, because I've got a huge amount of experience. So say you've got someone with 30 years experience in a particular job and something goes awry in a project and it's come up before. Well, what do we do in this? Well, we did this or this or this or this. So all of that experience and relying on and going towards what has worked. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So again, that difference between the ability to change something up and develop it versus the instinct. So almost like the intuition to improve versus the instinct of stabilize on. So, and again, the imaginative, hard to talk about. Ask Haley about that. I can ask some other INTJs about that, resemblers, and that imaginative subfunction, and then harmonizing comfort sensor. Those are the three main ones. So that's what I can answer there for that. This one. It's an unvalued function, yeah. And like I said, sometimes it can be stronger. Like in myself, I think FI is quite strong, but I don't like being in an FI state. There's also little information on how the functions actually interact with each other. For instance, how does NI interact with TI, and how those functions can change their configuration in order to keep in their extroverted TE-NE orientation. Right, so this is for, I assume I'm going to do this as a reference type for INTJ because there's a lot of INTJ interest on this channel. relative to the other types. Ish. Like the Model G, INTJ ones on Model G have done quite well. Usually it's the IN types. Okay. How does NI? Okay, well, I'll sort of like go these two together. Quite speculative, but I have talked about this before. So should I do it like that? Right, so we're looking at this. Fish is water, dominant NI, the main club. So let's just go like that. I'll get rid of that. Hopefully it doesn't crash. Right. Right, so you've got NI with TI. So what do we notice when we interact with INTJ? Say you've got a rational conversation, a conversation between a couple of rationals, between an INTP resembler and an INTJ resembler. What do I notice? First of all, they're very good at finding holes in reasoning. So whilst reasoning per se is not TI, TI makes use of reasoning in its rational elaboration of its subjective thinking, of its, say, its, say like a thought experiment might be a good example of TI. Subjective thinking, intelligent sort of speculation, where so an INTJ might go, well, but in that case, such and such and such and such and such. It's sort of like speculative thinking, but wouldn't this happen in that situation? These kind of like, fun, but are you sure about it? Doesn't that contradict this? These kind of like things that you can get with INTJ and sort of finding holes in somebody's reasoning. So I will give you a reference. So on my channel, do I want to do this now? Yeah, all right, then I'll do this because this is absolutely relevant. The INTJ should know about this. You contender rationals, I have something for you because a lot of you may have joined. So on my channel, if we look for, oh no, I've forgotten his name, Santa's friend. Oh no. Right, okay, so how do we get there? So if we go down to faculties, function, have we done functions? Have we done types? There we go, individuation patterns. Knit. If we go here, don't play. Right. Here. Contender rational. I forgot his name. So, here he is. Very INTJ-like. Not as INTJ as Avon, though. I've never understood why it should be necessary to become irrational in order to prove that you can. No, indeed. Why it should be necessary to prove it at all. That's because you're an INTJ, Avon. You don't want to show your feelings. Right. Here we go. This guy. Well, Enrique. That's it. Enrique. So, very good stuff, like the way he uses TI in, so he often debugs other people's code. So he's like, and it's Enneagram type 1, he's like looking for other people's errors in their software development. So I suggest these 4 with Enrique and the one with Haley. And again, you got a little bit of contrast here between how Haley and Sani use TI. She resembles I.L.I or contender idealist, rather contender rational, and then role-playing SI. And again, role-playing SI, which is what we're flipping talking about, contrarian alternative SI. We'll get onto that. Right, and then if you got another one, we've got, yeah, he's a bit he's Burmese, but he's also quite Australian, and he's like, I like calling it Burma. And then again, here, I like this video. Amanda and Haley, strategic insights. Again, NTJ is more towards development, coordination of resources towards long-term strategic objectives. NTP is more towards construction of theories and prototypes. Now, all of them can do all of them because it's within that intellect, the intellect that correlates to NT preferences. Right. Oh, there we go. A bit meta. See the one that we're actually doing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back there. Stop screen. Share screen. Go back to that other window. Not that one. I've just shown that one. Not that one. Is it that one? Yeah, it's that one. Right. Oh, I could show that thing. Yes. If we're going to show my scores in, are those my scores? No, those were not my scores. But okay, mine. I'll just say my scores when I did the 8 keys. I'll just put my scores across to sort of show. Actually, can I read out Dario's thing? No, but what I could do, could I go to his? I could do it like this. I've got to think about how to do this. Okay, you can do it. If you go on LinkedIn and find Dario Nardi's profile, on there he has shared his Dario has shared his Appendix D from the Magic Diamond. And in the Magic Diamond, he talks about the club functions. He doesn't call them club functions, but I'm going to be a little bit naughty and read it out. Hopefully it doesn't kill me. But he gives an example, and this is the same as Vanderhoop. Vanderhoop was there first. So I'm going to give you the final paragraph. Well, the penultimate paragraph. Here we go. Overall, the results support Jung's and Meyer's notion of dichotomy as processes and operation. That is, there is a clear pattern where the top two functions score in the top half, while their opposites score in the bottom half. For example, if the highest scores are extroverted feeling, with support processes introverted intuiting and extroverted intuiting, so we're looking at FENX, then the bottom half is usually home to low scorers sensing and thinking. So he's got the club functions. So NF functions probably going to be in the top 4, ST functions in the bottom 4. But there is development. So Tamara, for example, INTJ father, as a child, she had a babysitting business, gave the money to her mother, and she's like various needs. She's developed her TE now, and so she's got this sort of like magic growth development money tantrika kind of thing going on. Right. So I want to get back to those questions. Oh, the question was like, how does it work together? That was it. How the functions actually interact with each other. For instance, how does that? Okay, so how the functions interact with each other. Okay, so the way I'm thinking about this is, I'm not thinking about this as units. These are verbs. All of these processes. It's like if someone can say to you, how can you prove that a function exists? Well, what you can say is, I can prove that this process exists when you're doing it. And you can give an example of, like, if you are directing your thinking towards empirical data and externalizing it and thinking about practical uses, and you can say, okay, as I am doing this process, and then you could maybe say, okay, you watch me do this, and then go through it, and then if the person sort of gives a little commentary as they're doing it, and it says, right, that is TE. Or it's like if you really wanted to like drive home the point, or talk to someone in sport afterwards. So what were you doing in that situation while I was concentrating on this and I read them coming over, like say a quarterback and then reading the game and all the things happening, and it goes right, that's extroverted instincting. Right. So you can go for all of these things. Again, if you've got a willing enough person to go with these deep questions, okay, that was the process that was. It's not a thing, it's not an object, but it is a process, and we can sort of use what did Vanderhoop say? He would call it subjective No, introspective data. That's it. Introspective data, your own experience of it. So I'm not going to get to that question. How does NI and TI use together? Well, they really, because again, you've got an NT and they do a lot of introverting. So by the introverting, that means they're subjectifying their thought processes. So their thought processes of INTJ are going to be highly subjective, and it's going to be with their NI. So it's probably going to be a lot of their NI intuitions, and then they're going to be thinking about their intuitions, right, and gaining insights into their intuitions, and so subjectifying their intuitions, and it's a lot of introverting and a lot of thinking, and that's the state that they're going to be in a lot. So NI, that TI fishes water is going to be there a lot with INTJ. Now, what is valued in them is money. The INTJ is like money and practical stuff. Like it was funny with Dario, where he was like being helpful and like giving out a document. It was in this hosting this event. This is just an INTJ thing. I was hosting this event and giving a sort of seminar, and he goes, "Oh, and afterwards, if you would like more information, here is some brochures are available." And then he just slips in at the end, $10 each. And I thought, okay, that's nice and INTJ. Yeah. TE value one. But that's just a little tail there for those people who think Dario's INTP. No, his TE comes through. Right. I'm not like Socionics, which would say TE is only business logic. I wouldn't say that. I would say that it's a part of it. And also, temperament matters as well with these functions. So, for example, I would argue that NFJs are better at TI than SFJs. But I would argue that SFJs are better at TE than NFJs because of the temperament thing, because you've got SFJs being good at logistics and TE is involved in logistics. And then NFJs, then you've got an overlap between the abstraction of the NFJs and the subjective thinking. So, because subjective thinking tends to be abstract, not necessarily. I mean, it can be in, say, ISTP, but less abstract. But you know what I mean? So in practice, SF. So if you were to compare ISFJ and INFJ, I would say INFJ is better at understanding, say, abstract information, and in that abstract information, so it's like a lot of like socionic stuff. A lot of that abstract information relies on TI, but an ISFJ, they can get stuff done. They can get stuff done in the physical realm better than INFJ. So you could say their TE is better, but it's because of their instinct to want to protect and all of these other things and do these logistical actions. So temperament matters. And because INTJ is a rational temperament person, then NI with TI, and they are going to be analyzing their intuitions, and part of them is going to be that they're going to really reason with it as well, because they trust reason. Now, Kersey would say the idealists trust intuition and the rationals trust reason. INTJs will rarely talk about their intuition, because they trust reason. So they might have a lot of that. They do a lot more intuiting maybe than what they reveal. And also a lot of that, as Haley has talked about, if a lot of that intuiting is sort of non-verbal, then it's like, and then a sense of knowing, and it's like, and I can't be bothered to explain it to anyone anyway. So you can get a lot sort of that hints of the hidden intuitive side of INTJs. Whereas, the NFJ is a lot more happy to talk about their intuiting and sort of like wear it on their sleeve and go, well, look at all of this, NI. Right, so questions. How far have we been going? 34 minutes already. Right. Oh, right, that was it. So I'm saying that if INTJ is introverting a lot, then they're going to stay here, and then when they're extroverting, well, the intuitions that they're having, this is a dynamic model, their intuiting that they're having is going to be extroverting intuiting, it's going to be empirical intuiting, and their thinking is going to be empirical because, again, it's situational extrovert. So INTJ that is sort of thinking about, right, time to make some money, and they're going to be thinking about their process, and then they are directing their intuition towards the world, and then possibilities and opportunities within the world, and so that's going to be quite a strong. But the thing is with INTJ, they're a little bit like Enneagram 5 in that they're quite mean with their, stingy with their time, energy, and money. But when they spend their time, energy, and money, they tend to spend it very wisely. They certainly spend their time very wisely, and so they get a lot done. Because they're a low energy type, low physical energy type, because the lead NI. And that's your main difference between INTJ and ENTJ, is just energy level. EJs have a lot more energy than I.L.I. Introverted irrational types, SI and NI DOMs. That said, so I've just said that about the energy level, but SI DOMs, they probably get a lot done just by doing like a slow, gentle pace, like the marathon runner for the SI DOM. And also they can sort of get themselves into a state where they're enjoying doing it. And again, temperament things about doing stuff out of duty. And they can sort of just get into a mode if it's like a repetitive action, just sort of like get into it and get it done. What else? So you notice here that the weakest two, some of the weakest functions, like, I mean, arguably they are the weakest two. It's either that or that. If you sort of go by, okay, the preference of the contender rational, the NIT, to introvert and to think, and then the opposite away from that is you're going to be, and again, SE and FE is neither introverting, so it's not part of the default row, and they're not part of the club. They're not part of the strategic intellect. So you can see why these are furthest away from this. When they're using these two, you can say, well, they're still within the strategic intellect. It's still probably going to achieve strategic goals that's associated with the rational type, or within these, whatever, it's still within the introverting preference. So that, I think, makes sense. So again, arrangement of functions. What does the dabbling FI function have? What role, does the dabbling FI function have in the process of the intuitive thinking functions NITI? Okay. What role does it have? Okay, let's have a look at the dabbler, and then I'll go on about that. Slot 5, dabbling tertiary, has low endurance, hence the name. The type has more short-lived, eyes bigger than its belly, motivation and ability for this function. Overplays its moderate hand. It can come across as someone having pretensions for the function in slot 5, i.e. the person is not as good at this function as it thinks it is because the person does not fully commit to the function. It only dabbles it unless there is a non-type factor to encourage its use, especially in requirement summons. Obviously, you might have an INTJ counselor. Beneficiary, yeah, sometimes INTJs can sound INFP, FINX. Right, so with that question, dabbling FI in the process of intuitive functions, what role does dabbling have in the process of intuitive functions? Right, okay. So I'm going to go to FI, and then I'm going to say how they relate to the default, the default functions. Default what? Default club functions. That's it. Default club functions. I forget my own model. I think it's default club functions because I've changed these terms quite a bit. Yeah, default club functions from field of consciousness and all these other things. Right, FI. So the INTJs. They might relate to, okay, FI with NI. Well, with NI, you could get quite a lot going on. INTJ can be the most authentic type because there's no like FE. It's hardly any FE to contradict it. So it's almost like unchecked FI in INTJ. So assertive. Yes. So yeah. You could say that INTJs can assert. So they can assert what they think is right, and they might have an intuition about what they think is right. No, this is the right way to do it. I know. And it's like because they've had the intuition about it and they've analyzed it, and it's like, and then they've got this strong feeling about being right. So it's like assertive FI, and it's like, look, you don't know anyway. I've thought about it. I've INTJ'd this issue. Right. Imaginative. Is that character not as oneself? You'd have to think about if an INTJ is doing. Okay, you could have an INTJ writer. Was Isaac Asimov INTJ? Probably some kind of INT resembler. Okay, so how would that work? So someone's put themselves in the center of the character, and it's like a science fiction thing, and they're rationalizing things through. Maybe they've got some access to some FI with the characters. Right, because I was specifically thinking about something like that in its relation to NI and TI. Maybe a development about INTJ can save it, sort of see how something is developing, sort of socially, maybe sort of some social unrest, and they might be thinking, why are they thinking about that? Because maybe they're thinking about, that's going to cut off my investments. They might see some political risk in the United States or something. Like, I won't invest there. A little bit of FI coming. I don't feel good about that market. Ethics of relations. Right. Ethics of relations. Okay. Bringing different things into harmony. Maybe with the NI and the TI, and they've got various factors, and it's like when they're not sure on a reason level what is the most important factor, they might have a feeling about what is the most important factor, or maybe maybe the intuition manifests in a feeling, and it's like, I've got a feeling about this, but I don't know why I've got a feeling about this. Maybe that the NI could manifest through the FI, and also certain situations where INTJ can sound like an INFP when they're in the mode of like talking about what's important, how things should be done. A lot of INTJs are libertarian, Dario being an example. It's a very IT thing. Well, not IT thing, because ISTJs. A lot of NTs and STPs are libertarian. Yeah. Right. Any other? Right. I feel like I'm writing the profile. In what aspects is SE inferior? What obstacles it creates in the dominant, and how it can be integrated or synergized with it? Well, that's from Dario's book, but I can give you some examples. What obstacles it creates in the dominant, and how can it be integrated or synergized with it? Right. So, well, you got a vision of a plan and a strategic goal. SE. Impulse to action. Hi, PK. Probably an Indian first name, although one can't be or Far East. So I'm going to do so NI with SE. That part of SE that is about assertiveness, that is about not just that, because it's an assertive function, not too bad. There is an action that when the SE DOM is focused, SE DOM is focused, they can get stuff done because they got the energy level. So I would say Ni with Se. Again, it's like, how does it work in synergy? Ni. If you've got too much Ni and it's like, you're in downtime and you're in through time, well, you got to get it done, and you got to get it done now in order to achieve that goal, like to get the steps. So be in time. Yeah, I agree. This is why I have moved away from it, and I can die. I've put a lot of stuff in. Okay, I'm going to digress now. You've forced me onto it. This is a bugbear of mine. Yes, I wrote all of this stuff about, yeah, because it's a little bit of a difference I have with Victor, because Victor has arranged Model G. Yeah, okay, I will give you the reality. You'll come to the right place, because this is one of these things I'm thinking about a lot. So, Victor is extremely deductive. So, he has arranged Model G in a benefit row, and so he's got TE in the bottom right. But he did come up with this nice idea of the difference between information and energy. So it is true that, so I'm going to go through now the relationship between information and energy. And this is very important, that yes, INTPs should get good at TE because a lot of them work in science, you know. So I'm like, it's almost ridiculous to say that but it's like they just have to learn to develop that TE. So I'm gonna slightly change my screen so I make it bigger. Right, so this is all the stuff in red. Okay, this oblong's red text is slot 4. So that's gonna be that position. So this is where it's gonna be TE for yeah, because ignoring it's gonna be TE for kin. This oblong's red text is slot 4. I have adapted asterisk rather than adopted, because my view of this slot is very different from Dr. G's when it comes to its efficacy. My key assertion is that the higher the information one has about a function-related task, the more understanding and know-how one has. This leads to higher task efficiency, i.e. low effort to effect ratio. For something the type resembler is not overly keen about doing. For a comparison, slot 8 averse has low information, which I correlate to low potential ability and low internal motivation, i.e. not overly keen about doing. For comparison, slot 8, so, and then I'm going to talk about that important dynamic to grasp. Going back to the top. This is an idea I've adopted from Dr. Victor Galenka's Model G, that slot 8 in Model G is high in information but low in energy. I frame this as slot 4 being high in potential ability but low in internal motivation. External motivation can work wonders, e.g. someone could give you $1,000 of motivation to mow a lawn, but that $1,000 has less relevance to an average person tasked with scoring 150 an IQ test and to get the catch. In that case, it comes down to ability more than motivation. Ability is the ally of willpower, to go on the phrase. So, with the effort required and motivation to spend the effort. So, ordinarily, INTP wouldn't get a lot of TE done. But I would think in your situation, like, because there's quite a bit of a work ethic in India, and especially amongst the Indians that emigrated to England, because I live in a part of England with a large population with ancestry from the subcontinent. Now, it might have been that particular generation that I grew up with because their parents were immigrants from India. And so you tend to think maybe they're a little bit more Enneagram 3-ish, more want to, and they probably came over in the 60s and 70s. Anyhow, so, but I digress. This idea of, so even Victor's own, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through Victor's own description of that position to show that there's certain other people I talk to about Model G who have a different opinion on this about me, but I'm like, look at the text. You can see it's not that weak. So, okay, I'm going to digress. I don't mind doing this because I've got the bee in my bonnet because I can give practical examples. Okay, if I close that, split that, I'm using a particular file manager that's very good. All right. Psychic categories, event. Okay, I'm going to do creative versus imaginative. No, that wasn't that. This is model G. I have some things done. Right, I was going to do an event called Model G. I don't like John Beebe. He I think is a bit of a. I have like he can't be bothered to write a description. So I asked somebody, has he written a description of how each of the functions work in each position? No, he hasn't. I don't think. And he tells other people to talk amongst themselves how they use the function. So I don't think he wants to write stuff that then people can analyze. And I think he's a bit of a liar. He says, Carl Jung wrote one line on the auxiliary function. Well, I measured that line. It's 27 and it comes to 3 meters. So anyhow, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the civil schism. So the civil schism, I should be talking about model V, but I'm gonna because this is part of it. So in Victor's own profiles, you can see, so for example, the way that model G is taught is that the 8th position is the weakest. So what I have here is I have TE in IEI, NIF, and TE in LII, TIN. And just based on reading these, you can say that TE is stronger in LII, in my opinion, because it looks here like if they just give them enough, like it says here, while a clear vision of problem finds it hard to take action. Yeah, but again, like if you're incompetent versus you're competent, but if you say, okay, I'll give you 10 grand if you do it. All right, then I'll do it. Well, so it's like they just lack the motivation. But again, you can have external motivation for it. Again, it's competence versus motivation. And that theme that the person is competent in this area, but they don't have the energy, that's my interpretation of Model G, which is consistent with a little bit like that. I don't use the dimensions, but it's a shorthand. It's a shorthand that works. And again, it's Dario's data would say it's third or fourth, that position, because it's part of the club. It's a club function. So I'm just going to go through all these. So FE, who is worse at FE? So again, this is FE polar versus FE control. Well, if you look at this, you'll go, this one's worse than this, because there are some people in model. I mean, Victor himself teaches that the 8th position is weaker than the 7th. And I know people who are on his courses with him. He teaches the 8th is weaker than the 7th. But I say that look at your descriptions. It is clear. I'm just going to go through these quickly. I think this is weaker than this. I think this is weaker than this. So this is, I'll just give the types. Okay, well, you can see there, I.L.I, and EII. And it's both the same charge. S.L.I and ESI? Yeah, ESI. And again, weaker than this one. Psychological goes, right, yeah, they have enough FE that they're good at diplomacy. It depends when it's the contradiction between FI and FE. And it also depends on development. I'm just going to show these to people. I'm going to just do it. I'm just going to go back to the beginning so that people can see all of the details. because I don't want to spend too long on this because I want to get back on track. So, okay, what we're comparing here, this is NIT on the left. So polar, vulnerable NIT on the left, vulnerable FE in NIT, INTJ, and then INFP on the right. And I would argue that based on the own descriptions, that if you were to read this, you would say, okay, this one is weaker at FE than this one. Right. This one is weaker at FE than this one. And this is SLI versus, SLI versus ESI. Yeah, the reason I put these here is because they're different. They don't correlate to the KBN types, Kersey, Bones, Nardi. Great. Okay, so this is going to be ENTP. Yes, ENTP, FI plus. And this is going to be ENFJ. Now, I would say here, based on reading this, I would say this is far weaker FI than this one, EIE. This is going to be, okay, so this is going to be a sensory introvert. This is going to be LSI. Is that LSI? No, it's not LSI. Because it's minus. It's going to be ESI. Yes, ESI. ESI, and that is going to be any minus. Okay, that is going to be IEI. That's going to be, so this is going to be NIFX, and this is going to be FISX. And again, I would say that it's clear from here that this box displays weaker NE than this one. I plus, this is LSI, and this is going to be NI minus, again I.L.I, and again you can see this is weaker than this. Oh, absolutely. I absolutely believe that somebody should work on the ignoring function, and I've put it in sort of my I'm not really put it in, but I honestly do think people should work on the role and the ignoring. The only one that really can't be worked on is the Achilles heel. You have to sort of spend a lot. You just want to get by with that one, or maybe certain subfunctions over the other ones. Again, I think that's stronger than that. SE plus. Okay, so this is going to be EII, so this is going to be INFP, and this is going to be SE plus. I know another right spinning type, so that's going to be SEI. Again, actively condemns obsession, rudeness, and if you're actively condemning it, you're not that weak with the assertive subfunction. This is all like the assertive subfunction of SE, in my opinion. So you can see weaker on the left than on the right. And again, and we compare, on the left is vulnerable, on the right is control. Ignoring. And again, this is going to be INTP. But again, so Victor teaches that slot 8 is weaker. But again, own descriptions, you can see here. That's weak. I mean, look at this. Specialist in self-defense. Like, you can see if you just look at this, like, this is weaker than this one. So the vulnerable is weaker than the control. Again, the information helps. So the theme here is it knows how to do it, but it ain't got the energy. But again, that's like the way his model works. And on the left, SI, again, weaker than on the right, SI minus. Okay, that's going to be ESFP. That's going to be ENFJ. Right, TE plus. Okay, TE plus. So that's going to be INFJ, and that's going to that's LII, INTP. This is going to be TE minus. Okay, that's going to be SEI, and this is going to be well, that's going to be That's LSI. That's LSI. And again, controls position and correctness. I mean, you can see here that it's strong at it. This is stronger than that. So again, that's why I'm going to, again, civil schism. What's this? TI break. TI minus break. Okay, so this is ENFP and this is ENTJ. And it's like, come on, Ben. We all know ENTJ is better at TI than ENFP. I know, and I agree. Have I done this? I've done that one. I.L.I's with FE. Done that one. I think I've done that one. Yes, that is ENTP versus, is that ESFJ? No, that's not ESFJ. That's ENFJ. Right. Anyway, I want to. So I've done enough of those. I want to get back to the back to questions. I'm only about halfway through. I think I did the FI. Oh, what aspects make SE inferior? Okay, share. Loop. ENTJ loop TE with SE. Yeah, you got a beneficiary shift there as well. Beneficiary shift towards, like, ENTJs that act like they're ESTPs. You get a lot of them, especially you've got an ENTJ 8. I've actually got an ENTJ out there for you, Catherine Favre. Now, she thinks she's ENTP, but she's also said she's got ADHD. So if you're an ENTJ with ADHD, you're going to think you're an ENTP. In fact, if you're an ENTJ resembler with ADHD, you probably are going to have ENTP preferences. You'll score as a P, maybe. Also, the ADHD will be correlated with extra divergent thinking. So you're going to have stronger NE. Anyway, so what am I thinking of here? SE inferior. I need to alter this. SE inferior. Obstacles and working together with NI. Okay, working together with NI. Well, getting stuff done, getting outside of their head and moving and acting in the world. And so let's see that quite, because I want to do this in terms of subfunctions. What SE inferior? In what aspects is SE inferior? What obstacles it creates in dominant and how it can be integrated? Okay, I'll go through all the subfunctions and then see how it contradicts NI. Well, first of all, when you're in a state of, yeah, they do. ENTJs do have strong NE. Use strong NE, show strong NE. When you're in a state of extroverting your instincting, you are reacting instinctively and reacting in the moment on impulse. Now, if you are focused very well on the present moment, then the impulses that you have should be relevant to the present moment. But that goes against the mindset of, that goes against the view of INTJ to think things through, to hold back, think things through, see how things are going to develop. Whereas the SE DOMs are in the moment. So the NI DOMs admire the ability of the SE DOMs to be and live in the moment. And as Jeff would say, being impulsive is being alive. It's then about the quality of the impulses. So again, you can see it in sport, you can see it in warfare. Although in a lot of those instances, they are going back on SI training and like what to do in certain situations where it's become second nature, almost. So, okay, we can go through all the subfunctions of SE in how INTJ might use it. Okay, stimulation, attention, immersion in the present context. As I said, that is in opposition to NI a lot of the times, because it means that Haley talked about on Saturday. I did a video with her where she's driving a car and she says that she's forgotten where she's driven and that she could have crashed because she ended up doing introverting while she was driving. Yeah, a little bit like they admired that ability. And also, look, how many INTPs are in typology? I mean, come on, let's go through the Hall of Fame. Carl Jung, well, he was at least IN. He wrote, there's bits of psychological that digressions in the middle of sentences. I don't think an INFJ would write like that. Maybe someone would think INFJ would write better like this. But okay, if we go through all of the INTPs in in typology. Carl Jung, maybe. Van der Hoop, yes. He described himself as an introverted thinking type with subsidiary thinking. So Van der Hoop, INTP. David Mark Kersey, INTP. The son, David West Kersey, INTP. Linda Behrens, INTP. Victor Galenka, INTP. Dario Nardi, INTJ. I've heard of, what's she called? Lenore Thompson might be, but I've not. A lot of INTPs, but it might be like this idea of like categorizing people. It's like the TI with the FE. Oh, I want a system to understand people. He have massive business build up. Who is? Which one's the most developed INTP YouTuber? Who is this person? Who is one of the most developed INTP YouTubers? Right, okay. Creativity. Again, it's like if the NI Dom learns to let themselves go and be in the moment and improvise in the moment, then that's good for their development, because again, it goes against, it's in that bottom quarter, because it's against the, you see here, by default, you're in your club. The INTJ is in their club functions, their NT club functions, and their club corresponds, and those club functions, those NT club functions, correspond to the strategic intellect in Kersey. What I mean by that is strategic building, coordinating resources towards long-term strategic objectives. So NI would, and that coordinated resources towards long-term strategic objectives, say in business planning, 5 to 10 year business plans, that draws on TE and NI, intuition, development, and practical thinking. Constructing draws on TI and NE, but also in the case of inventor, TINE and TE. So you can see that ENTP, their function strengths, because their three strongest functions are NE, TI, and TAE. That's why ENTPs make the best inventors, because the role of inventor draws on those three functions. Okay. I mean, someone's telling me out there, like, I'm INTP preferences, and you've got PK here saying, oh, look at this really good INTP. I wonder who this greater INTP YouTuber is. So I'll be interested. So SE, let's go through the SE, because he wants to know about inferior SE in Model V, because part of Model V is subfunctions. Okay, assertiveness. Again, they've got the energy to go out there and dominate. I mean, they can contend the INTJ, but they've got the energy to sort of go out there and sort of like be a bit of a bulldozer, more like ENTJ. But even then, they've not got the bulldozing ability of ESTJ and ESTP, or an upset or an indignant ESFJ. Oh, I have something to tell you about that. I remember that Strat's profile of ESE, colourful profile. He says, like, if their kids are given bad food at school, the ESE will alert the media. And I thought, yes, that's what they would do. Like that Stratis gave, like Strat's description of ESE has got some brilliant profiles, and like in the TE, the role TE in the ESE profile on Wikisocion, she wrote about the possibility of getting around the tax when buying something. TI test, what type am I? Well, what type am I? Like, don't, I can't do that. I'm in the middle of a video. Right. But the fact that you framed it like that means you're probably a thinking type. Right. Right, and given that it's got INTJ in the title, you know, there's the possibility. Right. Probably ENTP. I can't answer that right now. Adaptation to circumstances. INTJ can't, they can do that, but again, it's like if they've got their plan and their thing, it's this ability to let go and really be in the moment. That's hard for NI DOMs to do, but they admire it. You can what? Anyway, I'm in a minute. I'm doing an event, right? So another question. Oh, here we go. How differs the conscious use of a less valued function with an unconscious use of the same function? Unconscious use. Okay, that's going to be difficult to speculate on. The unconscious counterpart. Right, I can't really talk about that unconscious use of a function. Well, Vanderhoot would think that the club functions are conscious, and that when the counter club functions are conscious, he would call that a polarized type. So you've got sort of like a counter nucleus in the field of conscious orientation. I'll answer the second one. How would an NiTx morality and inner self worth be changed if he had a good understanding of the FI elements? And like so, how would he become more stable SI? How would the morality and... Okay, that's a good question. I sort of answered SI before. But I can do the FI. I'll just have a look at the SI. Right. 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 SI. Habit, routine, how can they improve? We're sort of doing that anyways to sort of, okay, the advice for INTJs with SI. Well, if it's the conventional way of doing it, but it makes sense, like, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, just do it. A lot of it's going to be overlap. A lot of this kind of SI behavior, not the actual function itself, but the behavior that results from an SI attitude is going to look like TE anyway. It looks like TE. It's just not the most optimal solution. It's the most, I suppose it would come across as, to the INTJ, as this person is operating by rules of thumb, using heuristics when they see an STJ in operation. So, but I can give FI advice. Right. Okay. So, and then the question was specifically, how would the morality of the INTJ and inner self-worth be changed if he had a good understanding of the FI element? Okay. So, FI is that function that is really affected by mental health. So, Carl Jung wrote that, and it was in the FI DOM profile, or it was about feeling, that if the person is egocentric, they can't do the empathy thing. So, if you've got, say, an FI DOM that's got really good mental health, and then you've got one that's got really bad mental health, then the one with bad mental health might project things into people, like, and sort of project their baggage into the person. Now, if you've got a TI DOM that's unhealthy and a TI DOM that's healthy, it's not really going to affect their use of the function as much. But I think that FI, because it is so personal, it's very much affected by the person's mental health. So, for example, if you've got someone in a fair witness position, no baggage, completely impartial. So, I mean, that sounds like a contradiction in terms, but there are like some super mature, like FI DOMs, where it's like they can separate their own feelings from their subjective interpretation of other people's feelings. And they've got this fair witness position where they really can have a really nice subjective analysis of other people's values and feelings and things without their own values and feelings overriding that and sort of reading into it too much. So just that kind of maturity within FI. So that would be good within INTJ. Dario and others have talked about where tandem use of TE and FI, where it's the FI will help the INTJ to prioritize what is important amongst all of the TE things. Also, yeah. Machiavellism, I can see that, yeah. Borderline theft, maybe. TI unhealthy, I don't know. I mean, we're getting a little bit, maybe another event, one to do with Jonathan. But yeah, I mean, there's unhealthy and then there's just bad use. So, for example, I think you could have a very intelligent sort of psychopathic TP, and they've still got good TI use. I mean, look at ESTPs and ENTPs. You can have, so that doesn't affect their ability to use the function because the function is so impartial. It's not related to ethics. Whereas the FI, I think, very much is related to someone's mental health because mental health is very much an FI thing. Yeah. I see. Yeah, you've developed you've taken the principle and developed it out and you instantly a will to systematization, as Van der Hoek would say. Again, assertive with the FI. I sort of mentioned that before with the NI. That FI, yes, with the ethics of relations part of FI, that can really help the INTJ in that the lesson for INTJ is that it's very hard for them to meet people beyond because they've got this sort of gruff exterior, of this like FE allergic exterior, so it's hard for them to find their sort of soulmates. Haley did that with her INTJ husband, so you got a identical relationship there, both fives as well. So, but FI is the saving grace of INTJ, that there can be a good person beneath that harsh exterior, which can be the opposite of the EXTPs, where you can have a sort of a superficial charm, but inside there's not as much there. So it's weird that I maybe because of my again the 6-wing 5-6. Have I taken my whatnot off? Let me just take it. Oh, I took off the trifix for some reason. I don't know why. 641. Yeah. So yeah, improve FI will definitely help the INTJ. It's like what's important in life, and definitely help with the relationships. How would the reality and inner self-worth change? It would improve a hell of a lot. Everyone's would with that inner self-worth. I mean, you got to have good FI understanding there. I mean, Dario Nardi has done so much work on like self-discovery in that lot and meditating and all of this. Like for Dario, it's like he spends a lot of time developing FI and SE. Yeah. Right. Oh yeah, and also let's give the opposite side of that. Let's give the opposite side of that some balance. So there's this book out here called The Good Psychopath's Guide to Success. If you go on YouTube, if you look at Psychopath Night, you've got Professor Kevin Dutton. He said he based it on his father. He did this book called The Good Psychopath, and he talks about the good and the negative psychopathic traits. And when he lists all of the good psychopathic traits, and it's like he's talking about ESTPs. Because it's like the calmness under pressure and all of these things. It's like, this is what makes them good. And it's like a spectrum. And it's almost like the ESTP spectrum. And he even said something like, the psychopath is the most likely to be in an alternate reality the hero. So it's like, this is, watch that. Psychopath Night. All right. It was on channel 4, probably in about 2014. Right, look for that on YouTube. Should I write that out again? Anyway, look for that on YouTube, please. It's good. And there's a section on James Bond would be on the psychopathic scale, especially again, it's trade-offs. It's like calmness under pressure, massive. In certain situations, low empathy, very important. And so that book written by Andy McNabb, a member of SAS, so Special Forces, Special Air Service, Andy McNabb. And so in that situation, SAS hero Andy McNabb, research process. And like I said, they did the thing called, here, let's have a look at this. Qualities. What we got here? Ruthlessness, fearlessness, decisiveness. Those are ESTP traits. Right. Andy McNabb, Kevin Dutton. So all that kind of stuff. Oh, right. So Vanderhoek used the word, if you want to know about psychopathy of all of the types, conscious orientation by Vanderhoek. And he's got the psychopathy of the types. Here we go. Psychiatry and the types of conscious, there you go, conscious orientation, and it's got all different. So I like that original use. It's just a pathology in the type, just a psychopathology, rather than it being a particular thing. So it's like you can not. I like that use of psychopath. It's just a disease of the psychology, a pathology of the psychology, rather than axe murderer, which is what we think when we hear psychopath. So, have I answered FI? You're more stable with SI. I sort of answered that. 6. Okay, how does harmonizing imaginative dominant subtypes, okay, dynamic affect the use of other functions and the individual type in itself? Okay, so, oh, Winterbird. In certain situations, I think so. Oh, you can hear me. Yeah, non sort of physical situations. Yeah, I mean, EPs can be calm under pressure. Depends on the situation. Like a sort of a physically demanding, intensive situation, they can be calm under pressure. And probably ESTP is best in that. Different kinds of pressure, though, aren't there? Like maybe if there's like a lot of like emotional pressure and stuff, there, say ESFP might be better in that situation than say ESTP. Then also I'm slightly contradicting myself here in that in that situation it might actually be better not to be calm, but to be like demonstrative in return. So any related things, I don't know about that. This is, I think I've answered something like this before in the past. I'm not just sure. So Winterbird, yeah. When he sees my ears, these turret stuff, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, they can be weirded out by any artisans. They can be weirded out. It's like, that's a bit weird. That's a bit strange. It's like they can be weirded out by that. Under pressure. They can be, but then also like they can get a bit demonstrative as well. But heard an ENTP say she was a good emergency nurse due to lack of empathy. Yeah, she actually said that. Yeah, I can imagine that. Again, all EP is the flexible active mindsets. That EP flexible active mindset. Yeah. Yeah. It like I said, yeah, calm under pressure. But then there can also, it depends on the moment where, yeah, I mean, like fighter pilot, ESTP is going to be very good for that. And it's a high threshold of excitement. And so we've got here. Okay. Kersey thought that. Okay, this is tricky. So Kretschmer had schizothymes and cyclothymes. And the schizothymes include schizophrenics, so your proper schizophrenics, your schizoids, those are like unhealthy, and then your normal people. So it's like normal people, unhealthy, and nutcases. And Linda Bowen said that she was taught this theory of madness, and then in the 1970s, and then from Kersey Sr. And then he said, but when they're healthy, he described the rational temperament. So what there's sort of three viewpoints on this. Kretschmer saw schizothymes as introverts and cyclothymes as extroverts, and he had a cold and a warm pole of the schizothymes. And so it's like, okay, the cold pole sounds like IT, and the other one sounds like IF, and then the other one would be like ET and EF. But Vanderhoop looked at Kretschmer's work, and he writes a lot about Kretschmer's work, Physique and Character, which is a funny book, by the way. Physique and Character, like it has things like describing someone who's asthenic. It says, well, taking the general impression, we can say that their physique is characterized by an absence of thickness. Yes, if someone is thin, they have an absence of thickness. So there's lots of like witticisms in Physique and Character. So it's like probable INTP, like the last sentence of his book is really long, and it's like how he's going to use this theory to advance towards a whole understanding, like the Uber theory that INTP is like. Anyhow, so Vanderhoop said that he thought that Kretschmer was wrong in thinking that autists were exclusively introverted. He thought they were extroverted autists. So the way he saw the schizothymes may have been like the way Kersey saw the schizothymes. Kersey definitely correlated the schizothymes to the intuitives. And the cyclothymes to the concrete types. But it's all for interpretation. Right. She said that. Okay. She said that, yes, she was aware of her type and blind spots. She said she reacted with logic and rationality rather than getting caught up in emotion. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so this thing about the functions. So what I tend to think is that, so say you've got a creative INTJ resembler, so NIT, contender artisan. I tend to think that if someone's creative, they're going to be using the creative subfunctions. They're going to be a bias towards the creative subfunctions of all the functions. Now, that's going to vary by situation because the situations draw on different subfunctions. But, so for example, if we look at the whole type level, ESTP, I would argue, tends to be assertive with most of their subfunctions. So, for example, they use the assertive subfunction of SE. And that's like your socionics for sensorics. So when I read socionics for sensorics, it's like, okay, that's just describing the assertive subfunction of SE. It's not describing the creative or the harmonizing, which is the adaptability. So if we look at the way ESTP uses TI, they use TI in an assertive way. No, this is how it is. This is, and it's like, and they, I think they will use all their functions in an assertive way. And that makes sense when you look at the type at the whole level is an assertive type. It's an in-charge type. It's an initiator. Barons would call it an in-charge type. So ESTP is an in-charge artisan, an initiator artisan. And if we look at ISFP, is an accommodator artisan. So ISFP might be more likely to use the harmonizing subfunctions overall. So you see, my system here is trying to be consistent with Kersey temperament, because I respect Kersey temperament so much. It really is good. And it works out, and it's consistent with Vanderhoop, and it's consistent with Dario Nardi's stuff. It works. The function pairs correlate to the intelligences, and it's hard. And as Wojtek said, it's hard to find anything wrong with Kersey. He couldn't find anything wrong with it, but he could find stuff that's wrong in socionics. That said, there's a load of good stuff in socionics that you can learn from. But I would suggest that people learn Kersey stuff first and the original, and then take the best lessons from socionics. Now, in general, socionics is very good with the intuitive types. So if I was to do a sort of a simple bottom line analysis, I would say go to socionics for the intuitive types. Although that said, there is some good understanding with temperament about what NFs want. Anyway, so if we've got a creative INTJ, Dario might come under that, actually. Yeah. Dario Nard. If you see, so because this is, so Dario's done sort of the DCNH, done the sort of the EEG correlates of the different subtypes. And Dario said that he wouldn't want to be like a technical subtype. He's not, he wouldn't want to be in a technical kind of job. So Dario's probably creative subtype. He's like creative subtype of INTJ. And that sort of makes sense for him. He's not an inch. Yeah, he's big. So with Dario, you could say, like, he comes through in his authorship that, yeah, I could see Dario using quite a few creative subfunctions of in NI, or creative stroke imaginative subfunctions, because I make the introverted ones imaginative, the extroverted ones creative, just because of external. I came about that because of SI, because Guardians don't, as a rule, externalize. They're not creative with their SI, but they are imaginative with their SI, because they don't want to go into, generally they don't want to go into an artistic career, because it's not a reliable career. So you sort of like, you have to sort of like, you know, find out, ask closer questions about, like, maybe, like, a lot of SI DOMs might write some poetry on the side. Right, so I do think that, because overall, because creativity, so it's like those two things: assertive, creative, harmonizing. That's a trait of the whole type, and so the way they use the tools, their faculties, will be in aid of that trait that's a whole pattern trait. So, for example, I think that, say, someone, say an INFP, someone's not an overall preference towards creativity, they're going to be using the creative subfunctions. It's like if, say with Enneagram, if someone's got an 8 in their tri-type and they're like got that a little bit more, so they're going to be using these functions in an assertive way. Or someone's like Enneagram 9 and their FI, we use more like the harmonizing kind of FI. There's like a big sort of like correspondence between Enneagram 9 and harmonizing. So I think if you know someone who's Enneagram type, who's like Enneagram type 9, there's more than likely going to be using the harmonizing subfunctions. So instead, so it's like adapting to circumstances, bringing values into harmony, mediating between people. And there's a bias, and usually there's a bias at the whole type level of types towards certain. So, for example, so we've got the idealists, we've got ENFJ, which is an initiator. So, and you've got INFP, which is an accommodator. So it's more than likely that overall, but I will give some exceptions, overall, INFP is likely to use the harmonizing subfunctions, and ENFJ is likely to use the assertive subfunctions. But there are certain instances where INFP can have like very strong assertive use of FI, where they assert that they are right about something and that Donald Trump is evil, something like that. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. Rhino, in my opinion. Biggest spender ever. Unproven pseudoscience. Right, I'm going to have to... so I'm going to go through these. Have I got any more on here? Right. Harmonize that. Okay, number 7. And then I'm going to get to your comments. Finally, how could he improve the use of his valued functions? And how would he be able to reach homeostasis by removing the negative aspects of the unvalued functions? Well, I mean, read Dario's book, The Magic Diamond. It's all about that. How improve the use of his valued function? By engaging in tasks which draw on those functions. Find the tasks which draw on those functions and indulge in them. That's because it's the function-related tasks. So INTJ that wants to improve FI, well, if they do a lot of, say, again, it's like doing the tasks that relate to it would improve it. You've got sort of stuff like that in Dario's book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. Again, it's about like self-development. 8 Keys to Self-Leadership and The Magic Diamond those are the 2 books written by an INTJ resembler. Those are the books to answer that question. It's all there. Like, it's a big 400-page book. Lots of quotes from Jung. Removing the negative aspects of the unvalued functions. Well, okay, so advice for INTJs with FE. Look at it the way Dario looks at it with FE. Good FE is good for business. It's just like maybe looking at... So, okay. Well, maybe you could get... oh, and if you get the ebook, which is cheaper, there's going to be an extra little bit in the appendix at the end. Yeah, Dario might kill you as well. You got a pirated version. You might feel like that. He's very strong on IP as Dario. So, right. Unvalued functions. Again, they can improve. It's like Dario. Dario's very much improved his FE with like lots of like running lots of courses and stuff like that. He gets by with FE. So it depends. Is it about improving FE or is it about improving people skills? So INTJ can definitely improve their people skills. Practice. Are they going to have, and just certain kinds of development can come through. But again, if like the answer to that question is to get 8 Keys of Self-Leadership and the Magic Diamond. Right, here we go. Those are really important because if we don't understand how their dynamic affects the type, then we don't understand how a type is formed in the first place. As a type implies a combination of those unique dynamics that can be generated only through the use of different combinations of functions. As such, in order to understand a type, we first need to understand the unique dynamics that creates, which differentiate it from the other dynamics. In short, a type unit is derived from a different dynamic than those functions. Okay, but you could also say that the type is directed as a whole and the functions are a model a model of what you observe at the whole type level, and you observe the type at the whole type level by using a sort of Kersey approach of, okay, what is the motivations of this type, and what activities and what functions does it draw on? And yes, it is complicated. And Linda Barron's mentioned a living systems approach, and that, yeah, it's dynamic. Right then, so I think that's enough on those questions. I'm going to get to the chat, and right. So Winterbird, yes. Right. Should I go through all of these questions? Let's go through all of them. Oh, thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, Model G, went through that. Yeah. Beeb, I'm not a fan. Its functions, its system's just asinine. It's like, oh, he came up with an 8 function. Yeah, so did flipping Vanderhoop in 1937, and hardly anyone has read this book, even though, why does hardly anybody know about Vanderhoop? Why was it left to Shalina to tell me about Vanderhoop when this book, Gifts Differing, which came out in 1980, and again, all of those copies sold, and loads of people have read this book, but what do we get in this book? Let's go to the back. Vanderhoop. Vanderhoop is mentioned. There. Let's go through. I'm going to go through all of these mentions of Vanderhoop in here, and I know people have read this book. Maybe it was just hard to get hold of. Conscious orientation. Right, so what have we got here? Again, I'm going to show you all the times where Vanderhoop's mentioned. As a result, almost all of his followers except Vanderhoop seem to miss the principle involved. Right, so I'm going to show you all the Vanderhoop quotes. Extroverted feeling types, type 93. Right. So it's like all of their mental processes seem to operate best by contact. Vanderhoop says their thoughts take shape while being expressed. However, the thoughts arising through enjoying the process of it often take lengthy and clumsy times of rapid abstraction. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, that's a good quote there from, you got Vanderhoop there. Now, the name of the, now Vanderhoop, the book is mentioned in the bibliography. It's got, where is it? Where is the bibliography? It's not exactly easy to find. There we go. And the mentioned there. So why has hardly anyone read this book? Vanderhoop, Conscious Orientation. The Kerseys didn't know about it. Linda Barron's didn't know about it. Dario's not read about it. Why? Maybe it was hard to find. So I'm going to be in my bonnet. Intuitives, 108. Then we've got Vanderhoop again, 108. Vanderhoop notes, children of this type are merry and full of the joy of life, but often extremely tiring. They're always thinking out something fresh, and their imagination continues to suggest fresh possibilities. They have a finger in every pie, want to know everything, and at an early age want to be something special. Oh, man, that's a little bit self-serving having that on screen. I'll just take that off. Oops. Right, intuitive sensing types, 101. So do you see what I mean? It's like, it's not blink and you miss it. Like this book that's really popular and Vanderhoop's mentioned a lot. Right, so that is all Vanderhoop then. It seems that all of that paragraph there. Any more on Vanderhoop? I've done 101. Introverted intuitives, 110. Right. Oh my God, look at this. Right, you've got a whole section there. Even gets indented. Vanderhoop. Right. Vanderhoop. All that Vanderhoop. So it must have been really hard to get hold of. And this is the book, Conscious Orientation. Now, the actual Wojtek translated it for me, the what the German title was. And it should be, I've written it on there. Consciousness types and their relationship to psychopathology. So, this is the book should have been read. Should have been read. Now, anyway, so, John Beeve's got his model. Yeah, well, look at that, John Beeve. You got an 8-function model there in 1937. And look, you've got, just like in mine, and actually the clubs are very important in Model 8 as well. You've got the NT functions. So that's the club, or the default field, or what's he got there? The polarity, that's the counter club, the counter nucleus. The counter nucleus. So I just said, okay, club, counter club, counter nucleus. I used to call it like counter nucleus of club functions. It used to sound a lot more Vanderhoopian. But you can see here, like, NiTx is there in that NT club, and then you've got the counter club, which is the polarity. So for INTP, and then he did it for ENFP. It's on the next page. There, the NF functions, and then you've got the counter club with the ST functions. So there you can see that there. So it's very similar to Vanderhoop's model. What else? New comments. New Chopper, I don't know about that. I need to go through some of these, more of these comments. So, Vanderhoop, he's got, again, very good book. And it's actually available, PK, on an Indian website that has a lot of PDFs. This book is available. So maybe that was the problem. In 1980, it's like really hard to get a hold of this book. Like, I mean, this is an ex-library book. So maybe it was just really like Sheffield University Library. And maybe it was just really hard to get a hold of. But like I said, there should have been enough people in the type community who seen all of these quotes from Vanderhoop in this book. And why didn't they go, oh, I'll have a look at that? So maybe it was hard to get a hold of. Because it seems that hardly anyone has heard of Vanderhoop. Like I said, I only found out about Vanderhoop from Shalina. And there's like one video on YouTube which quotes from Vanderhoop, and it was from an earlier book. They're nowhere near as good as Conscious Orientation. So he's got that nice diagram of, like, you know, how it's different for the extrovert and introvert. And then, like I said, and he what he did brilliantly was reframe sensing as instinct. And I call it instincting to sort of verb it. Right, so questions. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So, ignoring function, I've done that. John Beeve don't lie. Right. Yeah. You got to work on the ignoring function. Absolutely. Because I think I couldn't find out where it was in Carl Jung, but I thought I read that, like, if you're TI Dom and you're not doing any TE, your theory of space. Oops. And a TE Dom, if they're not using TI, then they don't know how to interpret facts. And the prisoner of facts. Okay, who is this really developed INTP YouTuber? Hey, imagine going on a channel about an INFP and it's like, hey, I know this really good INFP YouTuber, go over here. You might want to actually do that if like an Enneagram 4. It's like, oh, I know this really original INFP YouTuber, go over there to see the reaction in their face. Right. ENTJ Sean and E, yes. Massive business build up here is the link, and here is not the link. Really, I'm not kidding. Yep, no link. Right. Forgetful and disloyal. If it's just sort of like, it's sort of irrelevant sort of sensory details, it's like if they don't really value it, a lot can go through the radar. It can be forgotten. Yeah, I suppose. Never trust the INTJ 100%. There you go. There's some FI for you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is like that they're not in the same league as ESTP. They look a bit under pressure. Right, and then we've sort of gone through that. I think you're thinking STPs. But yeah, I mean, like, all the ones apart from INTJ, but yeah, I am. We've gone through different signs. I don't just equate psychopathy with axe murderer, but I like to use it in the original way. Borderline, okay, possibly. Machiavelli, I can sort of see that. Machiavelli might have been like a contender rational INTJ preferences. Right. ADHD. Yeah, there is some connection there. It does look like it. Yep. Here we go. INTP is more color. Yeah, I would say. Right, this is difficult. If we're talking about your classical image of autism, as it depends what kind of model you're talking about. If you're doing the model of empathizing versus overly systematizing, then a lot of the IT preferences can be overly systematizing. But then also you could say that extroverted autists, you could say ENTP and ESTP, and it's like there's a lack of a theory of mind going on, and that would be the key traits of autism, rather than just real deep introverting, where it's like, because the actual literally it's from like auto, within the self, autotism, like extremely introverting is how it was originally thought of. And that's sort of like you get the impression from Kretschmer in the 1920s. And Van der Hoek then talks about, but if you see something like by Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin, Simon Baron Cohen, I would say and there is a spectrum of like different traits, but I would say the key trait is it's not extreme introversion, it's the lack of a sort of a theory of mind, sort of very weak FI. I would say it's one of these things that's probably going to have to be split up into lots of different things. It's the same with ADHD, that there's different kinds. There's the ADHD, and you can tell that the differences, and it's like you want to tell these ADHD researchers, look, what you're doing here is you're not able to distinguish between the NPs and the SPs, because like an SE DOM ADHD person is going to be primarily like the hyperactive kind rather than the inattentive kind. So something's going to have to be split up a lot. But there is a tendency within autism towards overly systematic behavior and almost OCD kind of stuff. But it's more complicated than that. Winterbird, yeah. A bit more. Anyway. But they also like gambling. So they're also in suggestible for NI stuff. Well, when you say here, my ESTP, right, right, right. Who is your ESTP? Right. Maybe. Depends what I mean. I mean, that means split mind. Well, it would be consistent with Kersey, where you've got the schizothymes for the abstract types. Yeah, the IN. I mean, and Vanderhoop, correction thought introverts for schizothymes. So that's everybody. Schizophrenians are nutcases, and schizoids are the unhealthy. And schizoid sounds like an unhealthy Enneagram 5. Right. My experience is telling me incomplete. Yeah, it's lots of dimensions. Yes, lots of factors, which is why I use 3 things: backstory, personal circumstances, upbringing, Enneagram, and Jungian type. And if you want to do the full thing, the Ibukiki, individual social status, biology, relationships, upbringing, culture, education, career, and events such as rape, things like that. But like I said, you could have someone with Jeff, ESFP preferences, but for a lot of his life, he was overweight. It was only like last year or so ago that he lost a lot of weight. And so that's going to affect his confidence levels. Correct theory, don't have to do woo-woo stuff. I want to stop this broadcast soon because I want to get under 2 hours so I can back it up somewhere automatically. Okay. I don't see the link. Maybe it's... Anyway, so I'm going to go now and I'll see if I'll maybe try and post the link in a comment. Right.